say your body, you are exercising so rapidly at the moment, or so, with such force, like a weightlifter or something, that you are using oxygen in your muscle tissue, skeletal muscle, faster than you can suck it in. We try not to get there. We try to breathe deeper, speed up your respiratory rate. We do all kinds of things. And when you studied muscle, you learned there was a special molecule in muscle tissue called myoglobin that held on to oxygen longer than hemoglobin in your blood holds on to oxygen. So even with the oxygen side of the story, your body's done 2 or 3 things to try to keep you from getting into trouble. But if you really are going for it, you're going to start getting into anaerobiasis. And it'll take about 30 minutes to get in full-blown oxygen debt, and then you're going to have depleted glucose or not be able to break glucose down using oxygen. So then after 30 more seconds, you're going to have only been using glucose in just step 1, glycolysis, and we told you that only runs for about 20 or 30 seconds. So you have about 30 minutes where you have oxygen stored around in your body and you can breathe and you can keep working, and then you're getting into this major oxygen debt. When you are in this oxygen debt and now you can only run glycolysis, I didn't tell you what happens to lock you up. This was the name of the molecule at the end of glycolysis. No, I'm not going to make you draw it. It's called pyruvate or pyruvic acid, and this is the one we hoped that you would have intact so you could cut a CO2 off of it, exhale it, and send the acetic acid 2-carbon piece into bridge. You know that story. But that only happens if you have oxygen. If you don't have oxygen, your body changes this middle bond right here into this bond. See, this is the same, and this is the same. Just this middle part has become single bonds with more hydrogen. That forms a waste that builds up in active muscle tissue called lactate or lactic acid. Lactic acid in high enough quantities can make you go into a muscle spasm. The everyday term for that is a Charlie horse, but it's the proper term for it is muscle spasm. And it hurts, oh it hurts and it hurts. So if you're a basketball player or something like that, or a tennis player, it's going to hurt so badly you are not going to be able to continue running down the basketball court or the tennis court. You're going to be laying there on the side grabbing your spasming muscle, screaming like a little piggy. Because it hurts so ferociously. If you're not an athlete, like me, you can imagine when you take your fancy high heel shoes off after a long day of church and showing off at lunch and all that, wearing these cute, sexy little shoes, then you take that shoe off and your little toe goes, that's a spasm, but that's only a spasm of a little tiny pinky toe. And you know how bad that hurts. You're down there trying to straighten that little toe out, anything to make it quit hurting. But when it's a major muscle organ, oh, it'll just put them on the ground instantly. By the way, if somebody's in spasms, it doesn't do you any good to give them the potassium of a banana then. It takes 8 to 12 hours to send a banana through your digestive tract. That's not going to help them now. You waited too long. They should have had the banana 8 to 12 hours before their athletic event, and their pasta noodles too. Now what they need is water, 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 because what goes in must come out. So they need to start urinating, and then hopefully they're flushing some of this lactic acid out of their muscle tissue. 80% of it within 30 minutes will be hauled by way of the circulatory system right back to, guess who? The good old detoxification gland, the liver, and your liver will quickly, in 30 minutes, turn it back into pyruvic acid, and then your liver will gladly say, here muscle, you want this back, and then you can take that on through the pathways and make ATP out of it. But the other 20% may remain in your skeletal muscles, and that is responsible for the soreness in skeletal muscles that often heavy-duty athletic exertion causes. Your muscle, your skeletal muscle can get rid of it too, can reverse it back to this. Your skeletal muscle is just slower at it. than your liver is. So if they really are going to use you every day on the team, they might send you back to the trainer, and now you get a massage to help, because the massaging will speed up your circulatory flow, and that's to help get the lactic acid out of your muscle quicker. Or if they don't have trainers, they may suggest you get in a whirlpool, because the gurgling of the water, the pounding of the water against your skin is like getting a massage. Okay? So that's why you're getting those things. If you use up all your ATP, and by the way, where was your ATP? You made it in the mitochondria, but where does your body store it? It's been a long time since AP1. Thick and thin myofilaments. Remember Remember thin actin, thick myosin? These little bumps on myosin were called myosin bridges, and that's where you store your ATP, on the myosin bridges. That's the first place your body stores it. And before you can have sliding of the myofilaments, you have to have an ATPase enzyme release that will explode or bust the bond to break down the ADP from phosphate. And then it's off the myosin bridge, and the myosin bridge can reach down then and slingshot the actin towards the middle of myosin and cause the contraction. But that's the first place you'll go when you're rapidly exercising. So this is your first ATP source, myosin bridges. But when you start using that up, the only other place you've got in nervous tissue or muscle, your last energy reservoir for ATP, is a molecule in nervous tissue and muscle called creatine, and it'll store the phosphate off of an ATP and just let the ADP float around, and so that's keeping this from leaving the muscle or nervous tissue. Now it's known as creatine phosphate. When you want to use it, it'll clip that off, hook that third phosphate back on, and reform your ATP in just one quick step, and let the creatine just sit there for some later time that you want to store some more. So this is one step away from being available ATP, and it keeps it right there in the active tissue. These, however, all the ATPs indirectly stored on as creatine phosphate will be used up in about 15 seconds. So that may be what you're calling your second burst of energy, is when you're using up the final bits of oxygen off the myoglobin and ATP off the creatine phosphate. Are we okay on that? That's why preferably we're at a less frantic level of exercise, and you can run the aerobic pathway where you have oxygen coming in at the rate that you're using it. And that way it can run for hours because you've got the oxygen, so you can run bridge and Krebs cycle and electron transport. So these are 3 activity levels down here at these 3 bullets. Three activity states. So right now you might be in a low to moderate activity level. And so you're making ATP as you're using it up, you're replacing glucose as you deplete it, you're replacing oxygen as you deplete it, no problema. But then you get home and your significant other calls and says your in-laws are in town. And you've had a good weekend playing Halloween. Your house looks like hell. And you do have some personal pride, not much. But you might want to straighten up a little bit. Now, you could put the dirty dishes in a cooler and shove them out in the garage. You could put your dirty laundry in the trunk of your car, but you still got to mop the floor and vacuum and dust, probably some other things I don't want to admit that I haven't done. So you're now into a moderate to high activity level. And so your ATP is getting used up off your myosin bridges, and you might barely be starting to switch over to the creatine phosphate sources. And then your significant other calls you back and says, oh yeah, they're spending the night. Oh my God. Now you're talking scrubbing out showers and bathtubs, changing sheets, getting God knows what out from under the bed that your kids have eaten and just shoved up under the bed instead of hauling off to the trash can. My kids would kill me. They're not really that bad because they moved out. But anyway, just saying. But anyway, you know, just the dust bunnies from the dog. Turn on the ceiling fan and the dog hair is going. You got to get the ceiling fans clean. So now you're at a very high activity level. You've depleted all the ATP off the creatine phosphate, and you're running around like a wild thing trying to save your reputation that you're not a complete pig, but I think they already know it by now. And so when your significant other walks in, you're in the middle of the kitchen floor in a spasm because you've made lactic acid, you've been anaerobic as you're rushing around. I'm just being silly trying to make it memorable, but that's how you get to that state, is you're just depleting and never resting, and depleting more and going faster and faster, and so eventually you build up lactic acid. All right? Okay. I just wanted to show you all that your body does to try to keep you running and not running out of ATP. Now go back to your stapled packet then, because they're saying down at the bottom of this protein page that we were on that there's temperature problems that come up when you're talking about cellular metabolism or cell respiration. Because when you break the bonds of food or you break the bonds of ATP, all of it doesn't go into the energy of work, movement. 60% of it is lost as heat. So you're generating heat. And you have a thermostat in the floor of your brain. It's your hypothalamus, and it tries to help you if you're getting too hot or too cold. So if you turn over here, like this weekend, if you were too cold, going from house to house with your little trick-or-treater, then your hypothalamus says, vasoconstrict the superficial vessels. So what part of your body got cold first? Your little earlobes, the tip of your nose, your little fingers and toes. That's because your body constricted all those blood vessels so that it could keep the warm blood down in the core of your body next to your visceral organs, like your heart and lung and important things like that. If your body gets cold enough, your hypothalamus thermostat will trigger the shiver mechanism, which is random skeletal muscle contractions. Now you can override it consciously for a while. I don't want to embarrass them. Their house is freezing cold. I'll just sit here and grit my lips and I won't let them know that I'm cold. But if you truly get on the edge of hypothermia, you can't stop the shiver mechanism because it is releasing 60% of the ATP energy that it's breaking down as heat, and it's a mechanism to warm the human body up. If you're too hot, we do the opposite. We dilate those superficial vessels to bring the hot to the surface. We now vasoconstrict those deep core vessels so that we don't have the cold staying right down there next to your visceral organs. So you're literally trying to create a gradient. You're not trying to create an equilibrium. You're trying to create a gradient to take the overheated blood to the surface. because then you've got all kinds of heat loss mechanisms that'll remove that heat from your body. Now, if this was like last week this time, it was like soup when you walked outside. They kept promising us it was going to get cooler. We kept going outside and you just think, it's not, it's humid. When it's humid, the air is already full of water. And evaporation is when you're counting on your sudoriferous sweat glands excreting the hot water to the surface of your skin. So now the heat is in the water on your skin. You need to get it off your body. It's got to evaporate. On days where it's really high humidity, they will warn you on the ticker tape of your TV. Move around very little today. Go to a library or a mall where it's air conditioned if you don't have air conditioning. If you're not mobile because maybe you're ill or don't have a way around, then they say sit in a tepid tub of water, which means just a couple of degrees cooler than you. They don't want you sitting in iced water. It'll trigger this shiver mechanism and you could cause yourself to become hotter than you were before you started. That's why little kids, if they have a bad fever, they now tell us as adults, do not be putting them in an icy cold shower. Just something a couple of degrees cooler than their body. But back in the day, that's exactly what we did until we found out we were triggering their shiver mechanism and driving their temperature higher. But the good news is, if it isn't saturated at 100% humidity in the air, this is the only mechanism that will cool you down when the outside environment is hotter than your body. So if it's 99 out there, that's hotter than your body. This is the only way you get rid of heat, right here. So you need to get something, even a bowl of ice in front of somebody, blowing a fan across it so that the air around them is a little bit cooler than their hot body. Radiation is the biggest heat loss mechanism. These next three, radiation, conduction, convection, are going from hot to cold gradient. This is a temperature gradient, from higher temperature to lower temperature. So it's a temperature gradient. In radiation, you don't even have to be touching anything. You're not in direct contact. It's kind of like you go to a big party, and let's just say the thermostat never changed and the temperature outside or anywhere didn't change. And when you walked into the party, you were very comfortable. But after you'd been there an hour and the room was filled with 120 people, you started feeling real warm and hot. That's because the heat is being transferred from those hot bodies into the air of the room and then is entering your body, and you're not even touching them. That's an example of radiation. But that's the biggest heat loss mechanism there is. You know that when you stand on an asphalt parking lot, you can feel that heat just baking up towards you. Conduction, that is when you are in direct contact, and it's still hot to cold. That's the old idea. If we lived in the snowy area and you were going to go on a Christmas sleigh ride, they'd put a hot baked potato in your coat pocket. And that way, if after being outside throwing snowballs or riding in the sleigh, you got really, really cold, you could just put your fingers on the hot potato and it would go from the hot potato into your now cold fingers, hot to cold, indirect contact. Convection, that's when something liquid is running over and the heat is going from an object into the air or water or something like that, like a convection oven, or like that's the whole purpose of radiators with hot water, to carry the heat off a hot engine type thing. In the hospital, there's a blanket called a cooling blanket, and they can fill it with different temperatures of water to either cool someone down if they're real feverish or warm them up if they're really cold. So they can use it either way that they want to. So that's a cooling blanket. They, in a hospital, if they can't get your temperature down, they will even pack you in ice. So that they will take major extremes in order to make sure the environment around you is cooler than you to try to bring a temperature down. But you gotta know what you're doing and have experts there if you're gonna take those kind of extreme measures like that. So know these heat loss mechanisms, and the only thing to warm you up is the shiver mechanism. Now, throughout the day, you could be at different levels of burning ATP. These are called metabolic states. Levels of burning energy. The first state is called the absorptive state. And you've just finished a meal, or just about finished a meal. So do you have plenty of everything? Plenty of glucose, sugar? Yes, you just ate it. So this triggers your glands, pancreas, so you don't lose that glucose. So it secretes insulin so that glucose is delivered to your hungry cells and so on. And you've just eaten that meal, so you have more glucose than you could possibly use. So you're also converting some of this food energy to adipose connective tissue fat or to glycogen starch. So absorptive, anabolism of all kinds of bigger molecules, including proteins. If you're in the post-absorptive state, that's like you are fasting. That would be a good hint there. Have you eaten recently? No, you skipped lunch. And it's 4:30 in the afternoon. So now you haven't absorbed a lot of nutrients lately. Therefore, the ATP that was stored around in your body, like in muscle tissue or on creatine phosphate, you've begun to deplete it. And so now you're breaking down things. Glucose is going to be sent to your liver so you can break it down to, I said glucose, I meant glycogen starch is going to be sent to your liver so you can break it down to glucose. Fats are going to be mobilized out of your adipocytes and taken back to your liver so they can be broken down and fed into the pathways to be catabolized to make ATP. This is when it's been a long, long time since you've had a meal and you're depleting your energy reservoirs. We hope that you're in a catabolic breakdown, anabolic building up, stable state, meaning that you have sufficient food energy, some sugar is still there, to keep you making ATP as you need it, and that it's not completely depleted. Then that would be a stable state. You're using it at about the rate you need it, but you're replacing it as you go. So that's where you hope you are most of the day. I'm not going to test you on this last comment. It's for interest. And notice the calories I'm talking about are the ones on food bags. It's the capital C or kilocalorie. If you don't want to gain any weight, you can have 15 calories of energy per day for every pound you weigh. So I'm just saying, what if you're 150 pounds? Then if you can have 15 calories per pound, you can have 2,250 calories and not gain weight per day. Okay, and not gain weight. But then what they're telling you is, but you want to have dessert, a piece of apple pie. A piece of apple pie is 500 calories. And you say, oh, I'll burn it off in exercise. This is 500 calories. 500 calories times, you're going to have one piece of apple pie every night for 7 days of the week is 3,500 extra calories per week. You will gain a pound. So essentially what I'm telling you is, if you want to lose weight, you have to cut 500 calories out of your diet every day. And then you'll lose about a pound a week. Let's say, but I don't want to cut 500 calories of something I was enjoying out. Well, how much would you have to exercise every single day? You would have to swim an hour every day. I don't mean float there on your or raft or air ring with your bucket of beer beside you. I mean actually swimming laps for an hour, 7 days. If you wanted to bike, you'd have to bike 15 miles every day. 15 miles every day. Somebody might do that a couple of days a week, but 7 days a week, you'd have blisters on your buttocks from that bike seat. If you were going to run, you'd have to run 5 miles. Say a day. Now we probably have some runners in here, but every day of the week, 5 miles. So that's why they say it's just easier not to ingest the extra 500 calories. The exercise is awesome. It gives you those extra mitochondria per cell, so you're burning more energy right now if you're a regular exerciser. But the chances of you being able to exercise enough to overeat, that's a different story. That's a different story. But anyway, now you can figure out what you'd have to cut out that would be worth about 500 calories per day in order to lose about a pound a week. Even if it were a pound a month, Lord, at the end of a year, that'd be 12 pounds lighter. 12 pounds makes a significant difference in how you feel and look. That would be awesome. Don't set huge goals, just a little tiny goal. Positive steps are so great. Don't buy the Cheetos. Don't have them there. Because if they're there and it's a bad test night, you'd rather eat the bag of Cheetos than actually scribble the notes. Don't have them there. Okay. Now, we have finished discussing the molecules that you degrade in order to make ATP. Vitamins and minerals you do not degrade. Now, your bacteria in your GI tract or you may have to eat food, digest food off of the vitamin and mineral that it's buried within, but you don't do any digestive activity on the actual vitamin or mineral. I'm not going to expect you to know abnormalities, what happens if you have too much or too little of these, because if you're taking nutrition, they'll hit you plenty with that later on. But most of this should be a review for you, because throughout Anatomy 1 and 2, we've been telling you when you needed a particular vitamin and mineral. So vitamin A, you need for the health of epithelium and for normal growth of bones and teeth. We do not know what vitamin A does to make your bones and teeth grow right, but we know that the minute you don't have enough of it, your bones and teeth don't form right. So you definitely need it for that. And there's a pigment in your eye called rhodopsin for seeing in low intensity, like night vision. You can't make that pigment without beta carotene, which is vitamin A. In India, a large segment of the population is in dire poverty, and so they can't afford fruits and vegetables a lot in their diet, so they eat a whole lot of rice to just fill up on. And so they've genetically engineered vitamin A and put it in the rice, so if they eat the rice, because they were all going blind, their little kids were going blind because they didn't have vitamin A to make this visual pigment, rhodopsin. That's called golden rice. So they have genetically figured out how to do it. Now what they need to do is get off their duff and get it marketed out there for the poor people to have, because they haven't finished the loop and gotten it available to them. They're just bragging about, hey, we did it. Well, sell it. Vitamin D is the carrier molecule for calcium, and otherwise you won't pick up calcium from your GI or digestive tract, and that's the steroid vitamin. And you also need the calcium in bones and teeth structures as well. So that's a very important one. Since it's a steroid, though, if you overeat it, you're going to store it and you're going to have too much calcium, like bone spurs and osteoarthritis and all kinds of bad things. shorten your kids' growth if it's before they reach adult height. Vitamin E, that you hear on commercials. It's called an antioxidant, and that means it wanders around, this should be an A, and scavenges up things that have gotten in your body in a toxic form and binds to them so they can't do you a lot of harm. So it's for membrane integrity and molecule integrity, DNA and RNA in particular. This is one of the real popular theories about why you age, is that there's things that get in your body and they break up your lipids or your genetic material, DNA and RNA, or your proteins, and this is why things dysfunction in the cell and they start being sluggish or dead or something like that. So you hear a lot of people promoting vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin C, because they are for good health of membranes or good health of molecules that you're supposed to be building. Vitamin K, we learned about that one this semester in your first test for the clotting protein prothrombin. And if you don't have it, you won't clot right within 24 hours. So that's huge in the clotting pathways. The water-soluble vitamins, vitamin C, you can't make collagen without it. There's another antioxidant that scavenges up toxins. And this is also necessary for cell membrane integrity so that they don't break down, capillary walls, mucous membranes. So you start seeing cracking at the edges of membranes where there's a lot of stress, like at the edges of your eye or edges of your mouth or edges of your nose, if someone is deficient in some of these vitamins. Vitamin B, well, B12 you had to have or your red blood cells wouldn't mature. As far as what we're on now, those hydrogen acceptor molecules have some of the B complex in them. FAD has the B complex molecule called riboflavin. Notice that this has an F in it, and FAD has an F in it, riboflavin. NAD starts with an N, and it has the B complex vitamin niacin. So